welcome to the Big Data Debrief. It's a new video series where we interview movers and shakers in the big data world. Today's guest is Christine Yen, the CEO and co-founder of Honeycomb, which is an up-and-coming provider of observability solutions. Hi, Christine. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We had a great conversation at reInvent conference back a few months ago. I was wondering if you could maybe revisit some of the things that we talked about in terms of, the story behind the company. How did Honeycomb come about to being?
Happy to. Honeycomb's origin stories start from my co-founder and I meeting at a startup called Parse. This is back in 2012. We were building out, we were just two engineers trying to help build out this multi-tenant, very API-oriented, polyglot storage, all the cool toys at the time, platform to support mobile apps. And we were dealing the value of our product that we were building was really, hey, you as an app developer shouldn't have to worry about all the complexities of building a something in the cloud. You shouldn't have to worry about databases. You should just have to worry about your app, and we will abstract away all that complexity for you. Really great product. Developers loved us. But what it meant is that we had to deliver on that promise. We had to abstract away a lot of complexity for our users and make sure that we were aware anytime something was going wrong for our customers. The nature of a platform, right, is that if someone is building a critical component of their entire app experience on your platform, it's got to be stable, it's got to be fast. And what that meant in practice is that every week, sometimes every day, we were chasing down new and exciting ways for something to be going wrong for one of our customers. And around this time, 2012, 2013, state of the art was to have your logs over here in some log aggregator tool and your metrics over here in a dashboard, and jump back and forth when you needed to try to debug some issue going on in your system. And we tried all of that. We had a giant system and a giant setup. And the reality was that because we were this platform serving a ton of different mobile apps, to give you a sense of scale, in 2013, we were about 60,000 unique mobile apps. We were eventually bought by Facebook. By 2015, we were 1 million unique mobile apps. And we were trying to track down problems, often for one of them or two of them out of 1 million. And we found that neither our logging solution nor our monitoring solution really was able to give us this sort of fast debugging experience that we really needed to be able to figure out what is happening for this one app and why. Why is it different from everyone else? Why is this one app complaining when it seems like our system is online and performant? And that experience really led us to believe that this sort of 1 in a million debugging, this sort of really complex system and need for really fast insights into what's happening in that system, those needs were only going to increase over time, not decrease. We weren't that special. And looking back at that 2012 to 2013 to 2015 to 2018 period, that was when everyone was talking about microservices and playing with Kubernetes and playing with microservices and all of these architectural decisions that increased complexity of software systems and made it harder for those teams to debug. So when we started the company in 2016, we were really focused on this idea of we want the speed and simplicity of being able to look at graphs in a dashboard, but we want the granularity and the flexibility of being able to shove whatever identifiers, whatever metadata that we need into logs and have those two, frankly, talk to each other, work together, not have to guess, oh, well, we have this data and metrics and this data and logs, and instead just be able to go, boop, okay, I've got this line. What's weird about this line? What's underneath it? Who's being impacted? Let me break down by this potentially 1 in a million field like app ID to support my debugging flow. And that has, almost 10 years later now, that approach is something that our customers love. It's something that they find they once they get exposed to, they can't move away from because they need to be able to dive in into often a small segment of their traffic to really understand what's happening that they didn't expect.
So, I mean, even back in 2012, 2013, the scale of these apps were, starting to grow. Did none of the application performance providers, could they not handle it? I mean, there were some well-established companies at that point providing these tools, the APM providers. They couldn't do it either.
Totally. Well, the
Yeah.
challenge wasn't about scale, right? It wasn't just about scale. It was about complexity and granularity. And so I'm sure the existing application performance monitoring solutions could handle enormous volumes of traffic, but this 1 in a million problem gets really hard when those APM tools don't expect a 1 in a million problem to matter. When
Hmm.
I grew up on a lot of those APM tools when, and sort of that special magical experience with those APM tools was out of the box having these top 10 lists. These are your 10 slowest endpoints. Here are your top 10 things to optimize. Great. It's a great starting point, but it doesn't help with, gosh, I've got this enormous volume of traffic and I have this one really high priority customer or prospect or user kicking the tires. And I really want to make sure that they have a good experience, right? This almost sounds like a contrived situation, but this happened all the time for us when, we were a new startup and we found out that Disney was trying out our product. Oh my gosh, Disney has to have a good experience. We want to land them as a customer. We want, them to believe in the platform, but they're sending a trickle of traffic relative to everything else. So it's not a scale problem. Are these tools able to flex to what matters to me as an engineering team member, or are they going to impose their idea of what matters on our team? Sometimes that piece of metadata that matters is app ID or customer ID. Sometimes it's a combination of things. But when you think about the explosion, like when you think about the drivers that supported the rise of really traditional APM, everyone building apps on Rails, Django becoming really big, kind of these very consistent ways of building software. The explosion of complexity in those mid 2010s really moved us away from a world where we were all building applications in the same way. And they moved us
Right.
towards everyone's got their own special snowflake spaghetti mess that the APM tools just couldn't build a magical experience for everyone.
And they couldn't address this concern with, I guess, tracing, the tracing tools either. I mean, it sounds like tracing might be the way to get at these problems.
I mean, traces, for anyone who isn't familiar in your audience, are a different data format. They're a different shape of data, very often represented as sort of a waterfall of, okay, you have this call and it calls this, it calls this, it calls this, almost like a reverse flame graph for anyone who's familiar with those. The challenge is, uh, Honeycomb's point of view is that traces are just another sort of visualization or format of log lines. They are
Okay.
just a way to take logs and structure them in a certain way. Um, they're not inherently going to solve this problem of being able to perform really fast aggregates over arbitrary data. And that's the core of this, what's happening in this overall system for this one segment of customer. Who else is it happening for? Like, that's the English version of the problem that we were trying to solve constantly. Hey, our system overall looks healthy. Disney's complaining. Oh no, why are they complaining? What's happening? How do we stop it? Oh, we found the issue. Was anyone else affected? That's just that's the broad shape of what we kept running into that kept being
Right.
hard. And
Right.
tracing as a data format, maybe it helps. Certainly, it encourages some good habits, maybe structuring your data, maybe having a certain set of consistent fields that make it easier to work with that data. But it still comes down to, how do those tools allow you to work with that data, allow you to analyze it? And a lot of those legacy providers, because they saw okay, well, we can build some tracing functionality on top of our existing logging store. What it meant is that their tracing solution inherited a lot of technical constraints from the
Mhm.
way that they used to do things. So either it wasn't fast enough to really do analytics on top of their traces. They could show you a trace if you had an ID. Great, that's easy. We all know lookup, like unique ID lookups are easy. So either they couldn't do analytics or they wouldn't let you customize. They wouldn't let you customize their traces. And again, in a world where for us, App ID was this thing that was like make or break for our platform, that's really what determined what was going on in a given part of our system. Um, Even in sort of the late 2010s, I was looking at some of these APM vendors, and they did not make it easy to shove this arbitrary ID in there because they were like, well, this is our data model. What are you doing trying to shove this random piece of metadata that you care about into our system? And from my point of view,
Yeah,
that's the
it's
whole point. You're a data provider. You got to, or data tool. You got to let the users determine what matters.
Yeah, it's still surprising to me that the APM vendors, weren't more flexible in adapting to this, obvious signal that's coming out of the market, right? But you took this as an opportunity to found Honeycomb, basically, right? And your basic premise is that this data needs to live together; it can't be separate. You need to combine basically the logs and the metrics, right? And
That's,
how did you come to the conclusion that that was the right architecture to go forward with?
well, saying that our approach was to combine these signals is, I think, right in spirit, but in practice, not actually what we do.
Okay.
Our point of view is logs, metrics, and traces, taken as just three general, most popular telemetry types. They're just different signals that actually try to capture the same thing that's happening in your application. A user tries to check out of your e-commerce solution and fails. Well, you probably have a metric counter increase default world. You normally have a metric over here increase. You emit a log line over here. Maybe you emit a trace over there. And the approach that many vendors today take, which is, okay, you've got these three different signal types and we will combine them and try to correlate them, means that not only did you take the actual thing that happened, which is a user tried to check out from your service and struggled, you slice it up into three different pieces, lost some fidelity of data on each of them, right? When you emit that counter, you usually lose some of the context, the user, the path that it took to get there. You lose some of the bits of data that are hopefully captured in your logs or your traces, and vice versa. All of them. This is true for most of them. And then you spend calories trying to take these three disparate pieces of data and correlate them again.
Hmm.
Well, Honeycomb actually thinks that that's a pretty inefficient approach. Why? It used to make sense to have to split up data and store them in different ways because, 20 years ago when we started, some number of years ago when we started writing software for other people's machines, we didn't have the compute and storage that we have today. We had to find ways to compress data. We had to find ways to make data easy to store within the limitations that we had. But that's not the world that we're in anymore. And really, if you think about how users consume this data, logs, metrics, traces, they're all just visualizations of each other, right? You're trying to get at the same answer to the same question, which is why did this user struggle to check out? If you're looking at a dashboard, that's just a bunch of these individual transactions that have been aggregated and then visualized into a chart. If you're looking at log lines, you're looking at a bunch of individual transactions and using your eyeballs to visualize them or tell a story. If you're looking at a trace, you're looking at usually one individual transaction and all of the subcomponents. These aren't fundamentally different things. They're just sort of different levels of detail, different levels of aggregation that you may care
Right.
about. And so our approach is, look, let's start with the richest one. Let's start with sort of this rich structured, you can call it trace data if you want. Um, Really, there's just, it's as much data, as much metadata as you can capture about what happened. Store it in something like Honeycomb that is built for this type of structured data and built to analyze it really fast and cost effectively. And then you can visualize whatever you want. You want to show a graph of just overall requests? Great, that's easy. You want to show a graph of overall requests for customers with a letter, for customers named Alex? Great, we can do that too. You want to spell Alex a different way? You can do that too. There's a flexibility to working with this data that is enabled when you come in expecting that you're not going to be able to define all the questions up front that you're going to want to ask. And instead, you have a tool that lets you ask these questions really fast, visualize it however you want, and never have to worry, gosh, how do I go from this graph, which looks really interesting because it's got this weird artifact in it, to the underlying data underneath? What types of transactions were those? Who was impacted? And when you have that data split across into these three signals, pillars, products, however it manifests for you, when you have the split and then you're trying to correlate it after the fact, you're always wondering, oh, am I actually confident that this weird artifact in a graph is associated with this logline I'm looking at?
Right.
Because when you split it up, you're sort of just hoping that it all correlates back together. With Honeycomb, you're only getting the graph because it's churning through the raw data that you actually want to inspect. So you can have confidence that if I'm inspecting a logline or I'm inspecting a trace, it's actually part of this anomaly that I'm looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's really difficult, right? I mean we have to have these abstractions because I mean you can't I guess have a certain data type for why is my customer having a bad checkout experience. That doesn't really exist as a as a data type, right? And so I guess why do you think that you have the right abstraction here? I mean you're doing things a little bit differently than a lot of the other providers out there. Why is your tool, do you think, better than theirs?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few reasons. And, better is subjective. So I will say that we are better at answering abstract questions like that than others. There's things that some of these other tools may be better at than Honeycomb. Um, but I think that they take this more traditional approach because, frankly, that's how we have been doing things as an industry for decades. People are used to having their logs over here, their metrics over here, and their traces over there. But again, practically, imagine if you are, um, I don't know, a teacher trying to track attendance in your classroom, and you have your attendance list with names, but then you also have like a clicker or a single number that you report to the principal at the end of the day. Trying to sort out a discrepancy between the number and your attendance list is just that extra step
Mhm.
that might have been how you've always done things. But gosh, imagine the power of being able to leverage a spreadsheet where you could have your attendance list and then spit out the aggregate from that same core data. It's a change. And a lot of the incumbents in this space have been doing things the old way for decades. It's what they've built their entire product experience around. And as all of your listeners know, any data tool is only going to be the experience that data tool can drive is only going to be as good or as flexible or as fast as that core data layer. And so I will posit it has not been worth it for most incumbents to dramatically overhaul how they store their data because they're able to serve people who, without saying you have to make a dramatic change. It's, hey, you've been using logs, metrics, and traces for the last 20 years. You can bring them on over into our tool. We won't challenge you. It'll just be shinier and prettier to use our tool. Great. Whereas my co-founder Charity and I lived this world ourselves of trying to make logs plus metrics support this incredibly complex cloud native platform as a service. And we saw and we felt how painful it is when our needs weren't met by the way that we've been doing things for 20 years.
Right.
And so we knew that this wasn't the way that we've been doing things all along wasn't going to be the way that we do things for the next 20 years. It can't be. And again, all the stories I just told about the origin of Honeycomb are about sort of the advent of cloud. Now we're at the start of a new age. Now we're at the start of AI. Gosh, what happens when not only do you have 5 engineers committing code into a part of your system and causing changes and introducing unexpected behavior that your users will find. Now imagine each of those engineers has 10 agents producing code. Now imagine if you've got agents actually that like load bearing agents in your system that are running logic that you need to be able to debug after the fact. The complexity curve that we're on isn't slowing down anytime soon. If anything, it's speeding up. And so this need to be able to get at these like granular sort of investigative points of your system, the need for our tools to flex to what matters to us in our software systems, that's only going to increase as time goes on. And realistically, we're seeing some of the incumbents in this space introduce their own sort of unified data platforms.
Mm.
Datadog has Husky, Dynatrace has Grail. I can see these folks who've been doing things a certain way for 20 years start to say, hey, maybe we should be thinking about data in a new way. And you could see them starting to explore in our direction. And I'm just excited to see the validation. I'm excited to see that, yeah, other folks think this is the right way forward too, because we're pretty convinced. We're pretty bought in.
So to summarize, then, I mean, the ways that you're different, right? Storing storing logs and metrics together, right? And then you also have an analytics database underneath that it enables fast querying on this. Is that basically it, or what else am I missing here?
It's kind of, but it's almost as if you don't need your metrics, right? If your metrics are answering the same questions that your logs are, you
Okay.
just derive your metrics from logs. Then you don't need to worry about cardinality explosions and too many time
Okay.
series and paying per data point. You just have really, really fast data.
Okay.
That's a radical
And
way of describing it.
you're building this all on the open telemetry format, right? Uh, you don't have
We
anything else
are
besides that, or
we are open telemetry compatible,
okay,
but underneath the hood, honestly, we just take structured data. All of this
okay,
just breaks down to structured data. Honeycomb was started before the open telemetry standard was introduced. We
mhm,
love OTel. We think it serves a purpose, but also it is a way, it is a standard, not a secret.
mhm.
And we do this all because we invested in building our own proprietary, custom-built data store that is really, really optimized for answering questions like this really quickly. And that's
And
that's the that's our moat. That's what gets us the performance characteristics, the ability to work with data that a lot of these incumbents struggle with.
okay, and you've also talked about how Honeycomb is solving socio-technical problems. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Happy to. When we talk about socio-technical problems, it's acknowledging that software systems ultimately are built not just through technology, but human decisions. That when something is hard to debug, sometimes it's purely technical, sometimes it's because a human over here on the team didn't talk to a human over there. And so, one of the things that we've always really felt and tried to build into the product is accounting, an ability to account for the messiness of humans. Um, my example is always my co-founder Charity basically, grew up on the ops side of the team. I was very much a developer. We barely spoke the same language. When we were trying to debug things, she would talk about write throughput in her Cassandra, replica set. I would shrug unless she could translate it into users and endpoints and maybe logical paths that I could go reproduce in my tests. And a lot of the time when we talk to engineering teams out there struggling to debug something, it's because there's no way for those people to work together on that social side
Right.
to debug a technical problem. In Honeycomb, again, it's all just metadata. We want you to shove the Cassandra replica set IDs in alongside users and endpoints, and then derive, visualize and derive and work with that data how you want. Um, but I think it also, Honeycomb talking about socio-technical problems also reflects our interest in not just building cool technology and dumping it into the world, but really seeing as success for Honeycomb being, we want to work with our customers, we want to help them drive a change. Observability is a means to an end, it is not the end. And, you know, we know they have broader goals besides use a shiny new tool. Fortunately, we think of observability as that core building block that supports all of the sorts of good practices that allows engineering teams to have healthy on-call rotations and distribution of knowledge and all the things that allow the humans, which I recognize it's very not trendy to talk about right now. But ultimately, we think that humans are going to be a core part still of building software, building technology. And we're really interested in how the product that we build fits with the practices to support those goals.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the biggest thing happening in the industry right now is AI seems to be taking over everything. And we have a lot of AI coding agents out there churning out the code. It's raising all kinds of issues, as you mentioned earlier. Honeycomb just announced the availability of your MCP offering. Can you discuss with us a little bit about that? You're supporting Model Context Protocol now. How does that help your customers?
Indeed. I think it is a this particular development in sort of the AI landscape is something that's super fun and exciting. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, w- we talked about how me sort of entering the space, growing up, interacting with my co-founder before Honeycomb was involved a lot of looking at graphs I didn't quite understand. Right? It was usually looking at things that the ops graphs that the ops team set up, where I would try to interpret what does this mean. I am so excited about MCP server paired with the AI agents of choice for whatever developers use it going forward to ask things literally in their language. Hey, I care about, what does, you could say something like, my teammate is worried about this graph. They're an ops person. I'm a developer. I don't quite understand what they're saying. Why should I care about this graph? Being able to leverage LLMs, being able to leverage rich data like what Honeycomb has to really up level what engineers can do with this data, how they can understand their systems, how they can turn that into the insights that allow them to build better systems going forward
Mhm.
is so cool. And to think that no one was really talking about MCP, I don't know, what, 5 months ago?
Right.
And now there's a section of it in the AWS marketplace where Honeycomb is a launch partner. All the tools out there have plugins. It is we're at the start of a real transformation of how teams get to use their data. And what I'm excited about for Honeycomb is that because we've optimized again for speed, which is super important if you're going to ask your AI question after question after question. We've optimized for speed, so it's really great. We support those workflows really well. The flexibility and this richness of data that you can send to Honeycomb, that we're encouraging you to send to Honeycomb, will enable the LLMs to have access to better data and to be able to answer the end user's question even better. So there's cool stuff on the horizon. I don't know what it looks like yet. I just want to see folks bang on it, and I think we're all going to learn together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like there's a real potential for you guys to use AI in your product, right? To enable, like you said, engineers to do more. But in terms of, I guess, just AI in the wild, how does that complicate, the world of logs and metrics and traces? All this data is. Do we need new data types to be able to handle all this? Or
I mean, I don't. technical people always want a technical solution, and or like a direct solution. And
Right.
introducing a brand new data type, I am dubious. We'll address it. Really, I touched on this a little bit earlier, right? When
Yeah.
you think about the volume of telemetry that our software systems have been producing just as a result of the, sort of the cloud adoption, has already been this increased curve. Um, if you think about, and that was usually constrained to the what your humans could do, how many engineers you had making changes to the system and upgrading your infrastructure and introducing new application functionality. Now multiply that by, some countable number of agents. Well, you have a lot more changes. You have a lot more telemetry being produced. You have a lot more paper trails to go have to chase down and debug when something's off. Not only that, we're also building on top of these sort of LLM black boxes that we can't quite understand and don't really, where we understand the functionality of, but um, you know, don't fully understand what the effect will be of putting them together. The world that we're trying to understand is getting more complicated. Uh, I think that this thing where traditionally we take a thing that happens, we split it up into three different ways, and we store it in three different places. This multiplicative factor on top of this explosion caused by AI, like it's only going to get worse. This problem of too much data, where do I look? How do I pay for it all? We haven't even gotten into cost.
Mm.
All of this is going to get worse. And I still think a honeycomb solution of like, hey, it's time to stop trying to split our data up into three different ways. It's time to stop wasting calories trying to correlate it after the fact. We need a solution that is built for this level of complexity and the sort of rapid iteration that we need to debug problems in this world. And that's what Honeycomb was built for. So I think that we are entering an exciting era, not just for the engineering industry, but for Honeycomb in particular.
Great. Yep. And this is why you are a big data person to watch for 2025.
Appreciate
But
that.
yeah, and but seriously, you are shaking things up, right? You're taking risks. You're questioning why are we doing things the same way that we've done it for forever. And I think that takes real guts. But have you ever faced any backlash from that?
There are certainly some folks who are very angry that we are proposing a new way of doing things. And there are certainly folks who are like, "Oh, all Honeycomb ever says is it's just marketing," um, which I think that the tendency of technical people to claim any to the tendency of technical people to dismiss words, arguments, ideas as just marketing is a travesty. But that's a topic for another episode. Um, so absolutely, there are people who are dubious and skeptical and almost seem personally threatened by the idea that what got us here won't get us there. Um, but what got us here won't get us there. The world isn't going back to a simpler place. The world isn't going back to, you know, three-layer architectures and really cookie cutter conventions for building our systems. And change takes time. So I'm fine
Yep.
with that.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Christine, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been great to chat with you and to hear about Honeycomb.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again.